a very warm good morning to you and thank you for your time. I mean, I'm sure before you launched this court action, you did try and reach out to the Department of Basic Education to ask them some questions around why this national nutrition program has been halted. Did they give you any reasons?
So the reasons we'd received, and I just do want to put down on the record that Equal Education, together with the Equal Education Law Centre, Section 27, a number of other education rights organizations in the country have, from the time of closure of schools, been talking to the Department of Basic Education around school nutrition and saying, look, during the pandemic, the national lockdown, whilst food packages and social relief programs are rolling out across the country, it's important that we prioritize the rights to nutrition, to education, to equality for learners and children in particular. And we've been asking for this program to reopen since. Now, on the 19th of May, the Minister of Basic Education said, as schools open, and as she sort of put out or published the standing operating procedures and guidelines from the education departments on how schools would run, she had said the National School Feeding Scheme would also open for all learners at that point. And we thought this was great. And this was confirmed at a meeting that we held with the Department of Education on the 26th of May. Now, on the 1st of June, the minister came back and said, these are the challenges of opening all schools at the same time. But further on to that, we can't start any new programs in schools. And so the food program would open only for the grade 7s and 12s, those back at school. And what we're arguing is that there's a failure here to protect and advance the rights of children against the backdrop of what's happening in our country around the humanitarian crisis on food insecurity. And so we're saying that, look, you can't backtrack. You've already said that schools would open and all learners could be fed. And now the provision that now only says, new programs is incorrect and factual, for lack of a better word, because the school nutrition program has been running since 1994. It's always been recognized that poor and working class communities in South Africa don't have consistent, adequate, secure access to food and essential services. And so we have been saying that the minister has it in her powers to ensure and I suppose give political direction to provinces across the country to open up the feeding scheme ASAP for all learners. And we've, in talking to the Department of Basic Education back and forth, given recommendations on how to do this. We've looked at best practice across the world. We know that in some countries they've been able to use their scholar transport system to ensure that learners who are in the most marginalized and far-flung areas of our societies are able to access food. We've said you can platoon the ways that learners come in and get food. We've said in the bigger provinces in particular, those with that are now called hotspots, for example, you could ensure that learners come in for food packages that could maybe give them sustenance or nutrition for a period of a week, and they don't have to come in at the same time. Now, there's over 7.6 billion rand that's been allocated to this program, and it's already been sent off on a quarterly basis into the coffers of provinces. So the money exists. Right. The resources exist. If everyone listened to the last address by the minister, all the MECs had said food handlers have been trained, they're ready. All of our parents that do this work inside our school communities know how to roll out this nutrition program. So at this point, it feels like the Department of Basic Education needs these kinds of actions from us to ensure that they become creative. They lend themselves to trying to contribute to the social relief programs happening across the country. And there's some political will that's needed here as well to ensure that the department is going to be helping out social development, civil society organizations that are running food packages across the country. But people have said on record that those interventions haven't been enough. I mean, in an internal survey of Equal Education, we surveyed 400 learners. And about 9% of them had said in their areas, social development or civil society had been able to hand out food parcels. So the majority of learners that are still at home and are struggling as a result of no access to food, because learners get 1 or 2 meals a day from this function, right? Are struggling to make ends meet. Many have said, look, our parents have to now grapple with whether they buy us data and airtime to ensure that we can learn from home or buy food for the whole family.
So, then I just want to understand, if the resources are there, what challenges specifically are the Department of Basic Education outlining to you in saying that they could only provide, the feeding scheme to the grade 7s and matriculants? What are those challenges specifically?
I mean, the only thing they've said to us is that it needs to be gradual. We need to see what it looks like when it rolls out for the grade 7 and 12 first, and then gradually we'll have the intention of reopening it in the future. And what we're saying is that you need to protect and advance the rights of children, especially during this period. I mean, South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. So many children are going hungry as a result. We've got Teddy Bear Clinic that came and joined us in this court action and said, look, we know from children that we've counseled, for instance, that there are creeping circumstances of malnutrition in children, and they're reporting feeling fatigue, lack of concentration because they don't have access to food. So we understand the rationale around phasing things back in, but we think this is an immediately realizable sort of right and issue, and the department must be able to stick to its word and roll it out for every single learner as soon as possible.
Let's talk about your court application. What does it say in detail? Because from my understanding, you're also saying, listen, we understand that you're saying that you'll be providing food to matriculants and grade 7s coming to school, but that doesn't mean that all the children that are at home are not continuing with their studies. They're still studying, or at least we assume that you are providing them with the necessary support for them to continue studying. So therefore, they still need their nutrition to focus, to concentrate, to give their best, obviously after being well nutritioned. So in your court application then, what are your demands?
So the one is to open up the school nutrition program for every single learner with immediate effect. We're also asking the state attorney, so the lawyers for the Department of Basic Education, to respond to our application. It's an urgent court application within the next 5 days, and ultimately to ensure that there's a political directive or mandate that's given to provinces to roll out this program with immediate effect. And we think that power lies with the Department of Basic Education. But part of the respondents to our case are also the varying education departments themselves, to ensure that we don't get a case of the Western Cape opening up, for example, and KwaZulu-Natal saying, look, we'll see what we can do within the next 2 months. We need it to be a streamlined approach that ensures this program is rolled out, and the money that sits and is ring-fenced for this action is there and used appropriately.
That's where we'll leave our conversation. But thank you so much for joining us and giving us clarity with regards to this pending court case between Equal Education, we understand, alongside other stakeholders who've come alongside them. These are also schools and schools governing bodies taking the Department of Basic Education to court, saying they would like the National Nutritional Program to, of course, be provided to all learners.